Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, January 26th, 2024. Time for another show, but it's not entirely clear that we're having one. What's going on here, Justice? Okay. Looks like we're cutting it close with some technology issues, but everything seems to be connecting and just in the nick of time. Is that what you're telling me? Okay. Levels are 5 by 5. That seems large, 5 by 5. We could probably cut that down to, well, if we work hard enough, 3 by 3, I think, honestly. What's that terminology come from? I could probably look that up and share that with you. Have we ever done that on the air? That's probably something I feel like I've gone to Wikipedia on that one before. At any rate, radio lingo, I guess. So we'll take it and move forward and let you start sharing the news. How about that? What's in the news today? Gee whiz. Well, okay. There's a couple of things caught my eye early this morning, but I have to catch up with later. Well, not late afternoon, but yesterday afternoon. After the show is late for me. So, you know, no one knows what happens after 11 a.m. Eastern time on any given day. But Peter Navarro has been sentenced to jail, federal, I guess, contempt of Congress. He's got his sentence. I mean, he was convicted some time ago, and yesterday was sentencing, and the judge came in, Judge Mehta, I think, who's been handling lots of January 6th cases. And this wasn't about Navarro's activities on the 6th in furtherance of the coup. This was his contempt of Congress for his refusal to show up and give testimony, but testimony to the January 6th committee. So, I guess in that sense, it's January 6th connected. And who knows, maybe they would have found something out had he given truthful testimony that he should have been tried for separately. I guess that day may yet come, but not for the next 4 months or so anyway, although he'll probably be busy appealing his conviction and sentencing sometime between now and then. That's the same amount of time, 4 months in jail that Steve Bannon was sentenced to. He, of course, never showed up and, of course, got pardons for some of the things he was convicted for. But I think he might still be in the middle of appealing his sentence. Has not yet served it for his contempt conviction. But the update on Navarro is 4 months, and I don't really know why they do this. $9,500 in fines. I mean, I know that they hold out the fines as additional punishment. But I don't know, maybe time to update the fines situation. Most of the people who find themselves in these positions are not damaged by $9,500 fines, and maybe they're not supposed to be damaged by them. I don't know. But they're not being damaged, and as you know, it is now legitimate political discourse to say that you're upset because the powers that be are not hurting the right people. That the new line from about, probably about 2 years ago at this point, from Trump supporters. They were, or maybe that was even during his presidency? I can't even remember where we discovered that line, that they were asking the average MAGA supporter on the street then why they were mad about, non-MAGA politicians, why they disliked them, and I guess Biden. Maybe it was a reaction to Biden. He's not hurting the right people. What a fantastic way of looking at governance. Anyway, let's give you the rundown from the New York Times. Navarro is sentenced to 4 months in prison for stonewalling Congress. And terminology was somewhat in question here for me. Jail or prison. It makes a difference. And I guess because it's a federal issue, I guess we're talking prison. There's no federal jail? Is there no federal jail? Counties use jails? I don't know. I should clarify that. At some point, right after we talk about the meaning of 5 by 5 and look up everything else in the world. Peter Navarro was found guilty in September of criminal contempt of Congress, making him the second Trump aide to face penalties related to one of the chief investigations into January 6th And here is Peter Navarro making some of his signature hand gestures in front of the cameras. Zach Montague reporting for the New York Times on this one, and I guess they'll cover the last minute, not pleadings per se, but the speechifying on Navarro's behalf and explanations from the judge about why he was imposing the sentence that he did. Peter Navarro, a trade advisor to former President Donald J. Trump, who really could have stayed out of this whole thing if he had just been smart, who helped lay plans to help keep Mr. Trump in office after the 2020 election, because trade, that's exactly why you would involve yourself in that, was sentenced on Thursday to 4 months in prison for defying a subpoena from the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Navarro, age 74, in case you were wondering, was found guilty in September of 2 misdemeanor accounts of criminal contempt of Congress, making him the second Trump aide to face penalties related to one of the chief investigations into the Capitol riot. The judge overseeing the case, Amit Mehta, middle initial P, in case you were wondering, had rejected Mr. Navarro's primary defense that Trump had personally directed him not to cooperate with the subpoena, and that he believed he was shielded by executive privilege. Well, the answer is no, you're not. The words executive privilege are not magical incantations, Judge Mehta said in handing down sentence after a tense 2.5-hour hearing in which he repeatedly took issue with Mr. Navarro's claim of executive privilege. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card, he said. I guess they just don't make those except in the forms of pardons these days, and maybe they ought not to be doing that. Mr. Navarro was also ordered to pay a $9,500 fine. Okay. He will stay out of jail for now, at least until Judge Mehta decides whether he can remain free while he appeals his conviction. Why? Because we're just such tyrants in this country, and as you know, you have to overthrow this government. Okay. In a testy exchange with Mr. Navarro's lawyers beforehand, the judge singled out Mr. Navarro's decision to flout the subpoena, even as other aides to Mr. Trump negotiated whether to comply. I have a great deal of respect for your client, I don't know why, and what he's achieved professionally. I do. He's obviously a very fair-sounding guy, this Mehta, which makes it all the more disappointing the way he behaved. Appearing taken aback by Judge Mehta's responses to one of his lawyers, Mr. Navarro at one point stood up to speak for himself against what he said was his lawyer's advice, recounting his thought process when he received the subpoena. I guess this is just a natural human instinct. I don't think it's necessarily unique to weirdos like Navarro. Everybody wants to speak in their own defense, and everybody sort of thinks that they might be perhaps the only one with, the real understanding of what was going on in my head. I mean, it's a pretty reasonable thing to think. If you're of reasonable intellect, I guess, there's no reason to believe that I don't know what's going on in my head. I'm sure some people say I might not be the best advocate for myself, but not these guys. Anyway, he stood to speak for himself, recounting his thought process when he received the subpoena. Mr. Navarro said he was torn about whether to cooperate and that he had hoped his case would become a blueprint for White House aides subpoenaed by Congress. Why would you hope that? All they have to do is read the transcript of you here today, and they'll know what to do, sir. He said, I didn't know what to do. This is really interesting. So I guess the idea is this has never happened to anyone before, and I only defied the subpoena so that people would know whether or not they could defy subpoenas. I mean, that's not a great answer, and it's also not a true answer, but the judge, I don't know whether the judge addressed this. I think so, but the judge basically can say, well, here's the answer. You will go to jail. There. Good blueprint. Thank you. That's it. Also, I think I saw reported yesterday on social media that the judge was saying, I don't understand why you thought you were the first one. You weren't. Steve Bannon had this happen. And although the fact pattern is slightly different, you were actively working in the White House. Bannon was not at the time that he got the subpoena. But, all the issues were out there, executive privilege claims, et cetera, et cetera. No, they don't work as against an investigation and subpoena from Congress in a context like this one. So what are you going to do? You've seen the example of Bannon losing. you're likely to lose too. You also saw lots of other people negotiate their settlements with the committee and negotiate the terms under which they would testify. Why didn't you do any of those things? Why do we need a blueprint on what to do if you just want to sit there and hold your breath? That's not a blueprint we need. Anyway, outside Federal District Court in Washington, Mr. Navarro, surrounded by reporters and cameras on an unseasonably warm day, was immediately drowned out by hecklers blowing whistles and jostling with his lawyers for space behind him to brandish signs. I don't know if that's a great trend, but okay. Over the din, Mr. Navarro defiantly solicited donations for his legal defense, adding that he was, quote, not expecting or hoping for, quote, a pardon from Mr. Trump should he be reelected to the presidency. You shouldn't. There's no real reason for you to believe in that. I mean, it might happen, but the likelihood that Trump will just forget about you entirely and focus on his own garbage is pretty high. I think that's wise. But also, even if he's been personally assured by Trump or other aides that that he would be under consideration for such a pardon, it's wiser on a public relations front to say, I'm not expecting that. Don't worry about it. Anyway, Mr. Navarro, a Harvard-trained economist, and a vocal critic of China, served as a trade advisor to Mr. Trump. Oh, I see. That's why. That's going to be a major part of your work as trade advisor is dealing with China. And, that's why he was hired, because he was a vocal critic of China. Anyway, served as trade advisor to Trump before turning his focus to the pandemic response. After the 2020 election, however, he increasingly explored ways to subvert the outcome of the race and keep Mr. Trump in power, because trade and Harvard and all of those things. And of course, having overseen the pandemic response, he basically decided, what we definitely need is more of that. Along with Stephen K. G.B. Bannon, a longtime advisor to Mr. Trump, Mr. Navarro devised a plan known as the Green Bay Sweep. Under that strategy, they would try to delay certification of the election by persuading Republican lawmakers to repeatedly challenge the results in various swing states and apply pressure on former Vice President Mike Pence to discredit the outcome. He also cast doubt on the results of the race, compiling instances of purported irregularities and issuing a 3-part report claiming election fraud as part of what he described as an immaculate deception. Thank you, Harvard. For weeks, Mr. Navarro openly celebrated his strategizing, sharing details of his plan in his 2021 memoir and in an interview with Rolling Stone magazine. Those efforts ultimately elicited the attention of the House committee, which sought documents and testimony from Mr. Navarro. When the committee reached out to Mr. Navarro, he immediately replied by email stating only executive privilege. That was all he said, executive privilege, and never cooperating with the panel. After voting to hold Navarro in contempt, the House referred the matter to the Justice Department, which obtained a grand jury indictment. Judge Mehta noted the disconnect between Navarro's public appearance and his response to Congress. You're more than happy to talk to the press about what you did, write it in your book, but not to go up to the Hill and talk to Congress, which was investigating what happened and the causes of that day, he said. Mr. Navarro's lawyers had asked for 6 months probation and a minimal fine. He dismissed his dismissal of the House committee was essentially a misunderstanding, they contended, adding that Mr. Navarro had genuinely believed that Mr. Trump had invoked executive privilege. In asking for a more lenient sentence, his lawyers said the case had hinged on murky and unsettled legal questions about executive privilege and the complex separation of powers between Congress and the White House, questions that Judge Mehta had struggled to untangle over months of litigation before the trial. We're but a pit stop in our journey to understanding what executive privilege means and how it should be invoked, Stanley Woodward Jr., a lawyer for Mr. Navarro, said on Thursday. This case is far from over. I will never stop billing, essentially, is what he's saying. Judge Mehta bristled at the suggestion, noting that others in Mr. Trump's orbit had complied with the House committee's subpoenas. Any lawyer worth his salt, he replied angrily, would have advised Mr. Navarro to engage with Congress and figure out what is covered and what isn't covered. The judge also questioned Mr. Woodward's assertion that Mr. Navarro had accepted responsibility for his actions and was merely trying to clarify the law surrounding executive privilege. Judge Mehta cited fundraising emails and news conferences outside the courtroom in which Mr. Navarro denounced the January 6th committee as domestic terrorists and a kangaroo court. It's those types of statements from someone who should know better, Harvard, that contributes to why our politics are so corrosive, Judge Mehta said. Mr. Bannon, who left the White House in 2017, was convicted on nearly identical contempt charges in 2022 and sentenced to 4 months in prison, and he too remains free as his appeal moves forward. Okay, so that's the update on the contempt front. I don't know why they don't teach this stuff at Harvard, I guess, but what they do is send them out into the world with the belief that they're the smartest people in the room at any time, and really smartest people outside of the room as well, and so they're favorable to themselves interpretation of everything is just plain smart, and I guess you're supposed to jump out of their way at every turn, except, well, now he's going to have to jump out of the way of aggressive line cutters in the cafeteria line at the prison instead. So, all right, I'm not too worried about that, and I'm not too worried about seeing him report to prison anytime soon either. It sounds like they'll probably leave him free pending appeal, and I think we've all had enough of that. But that's the reality of it. Okay, speaking of the unbelievable reality out there, Scott sent me something this morning that I feel makes a good Friday sort of story. Great indicator of progress. We're doing great as a species, and our politics, our American exceptionalism, always coming to the fore. Missouri is the latest example where it turns out, we've been reading, let's see, was it last week and earlier this week, all of the fun examples of how we're doing in Oklahoma, where there's a race to the floor of the legislature to introduce all the latest Republican panic bills. We got a bill to get rid of furries in our elementary schools, which don't exist. And what else did we read? Oh, yes, right. Criminalizing Hispanic heritage. That was a fantastic idea as well. One or two other really, truly stupid, monumentally idiotic things that Republicans are occupying themselves with in Oklahoma, including, oh yes, right, also the hiring of Chaya Ben-Gvir Raychik, the lunatic behind Libs of TikTok, into an official governmental position in the Department of Education. Because they want to make schools safe in Oklahoma, they decided to bring in someone who brings bomb threats to schools with her wherever she goes. They don't need to include her. She's from California. But why not put her on the payroll in Oklahoma so that there can be more bomb threats in their state? For safety, So helpful that she's on board. Yeah, she really ought to be regarded as our Itamar Ben-Gvir type person here in this country. You think Israel's lost at putting lunatics in government. We're not that far behind. Anyway, down in Missouri, where they have some elected lunatics to deal with, probably some appointed ones as well, but this one's about the electeds. Missouri rule change in the legislature, not yet adopted, just proposed. You never know. Sometimes it seems unfair to talk about these things that are just proposals. But I guess if you ignore them, they make it to the floor, and then what happens? Missouri rule change would allow senators to challenge each other to a duel. That is a great issue. Fantastic progress in our ongoing march to legislative civility. And of course, naturally, this, in the mind of the idiot who proposed it, is a step toward, in favor of, in support of legislative civility. Why? It's essentially the armed society is a polite society version of a rules change. Somebody who believes that is going to say it would be best for civility in the Missouri State Senate if they shot one another. That would impose civility, because then you wouldn't be insulting one another all the time because you'd be afraid of getting shot, or you would be awash in blood and bullets all the time. It's one or the other. I don't know which one's going to come out. Let's roll the dice and find out, he says. A member of the Missouri Senate has proposed a rule change that, if passed, would allow senators to challenge each other to a duel. Senator Nick Schroer, I guess, Schroer, put a motion to the state's Senate to adopt a rule change allowing state politicians to settle grievances through physicality. I don't know if you have to be a member of the Senate in order to do it, according to that wording. But anyway, let's see. His proposed amendment, and I oppose the proposed amendment, was posted on Twitter by Missouri Senate Democrats, who I guess just couldn't believe it and wanted everybody to see it. It read, if a senator's honor is impugned by another senator, so I guess it is limited to senators, to the point that it is beyond repair, whatever that means, and in order for the offended senator to gain satisfaction. This is interesting because I'm not certain about the like I said, the wording of this. First of all, I should let you know this is being reported in Newsweek, which of course has suffered a catastrophic collapse in its newsworthiness, reportage, etc. But still exists, and Kate Plummer putting this piece together in her effort to sort of describe what's going on and paraphrase the language, I guess has confused things. Right. But so senators can challenge each other to a duel. They are, of course, state politicians, but that's a more broad term. I don't know why she uses that one in the second paragraph here. But it's no help that the bill itself is overly florid and, again, romanticizing this stupid bygone era idea about dueling and honor and integrity, and borrowing language from movies he's no doubt seen that have duels in them, to just make this a sloppy mess. So what's the quote? If a senator's honor is impugned by another senator to the point that it is beyond repair, which doesn't mean anything really, and in order for the offended senator to gain satisfaction, such senator may rectify the perceived insult to the senator's honor by challenging the offending senator to a duel. And that doesn't hang together as a diagrammable sentence. But I think they, came down in between two different usages here of gaining satisfaction and in order, right? If an honor is impugned to the point that it's beyond repair, meaningless, but okay, I understand what he's trying to say here. And in order, like it's not, well, if that happens, in order for the senator to gain satisfaction, there should be a duel. But do they mean that, or do they mean if the senator's honor has been impugned to the point where it's beyond repair and there's no punctuation, and in order, i.e., like in order under the rules, permissible under the rules for the offended senator to gain satisfaction. I mean, is there who knows what the rules of the Missouri State Senate are? Is there a rule that makes it in order for a senator to gain satisfaction? I don't think so. I think that's what this is supposed to be. But again, borrowing the language from the old archaic dueling rules of gaining satisfaction by having the duel or by accepting the apology of the offending individual or whatever. I don't know. So I don't think this guy knows what he's talking about either. Or he's just bad at punctuation. So I'm not clear on whether they're trying to say that there's a way for it to be in order that you gain satisfaction, or that, as opposed to the definition of in order, meaning like, such that you would be able to gain satisfaction. Anyway, so the senator may rectify the perceived insult to the senator's honor by challenging the offending senator to a duel. Now, again, there too, underlying logic, not entirely clear. Why is it that you would believe such a thing, that a senator's honor could be impugned, feels that it is irreparable? The portion that gets skipped is the part where you tell me why it fixes things to shoot the other guy. I mean, it makes the guy who was insulted feel better because he gets some sort of revenge, but I don't see how the insult to the senator's honor makes any gains in any way by, I guess, other than arresting the guy and sending him to prison for murder. But I guess that's supposed to be the idea. Well, because it was a duel, we won't do that. But by the way, that's not anywhere in the rules, and there's no real reason to believe that does that fall under the speech and debate clause, the equivalent of Missouri's speech and debate clause? We can't bring him to prison for this murder because it happened in the course of a debate. I mean, I think it's pretty well outside of the boundaries of debate. Anyway, it goes on. There's more to this stupid resolution. It goes on and tries to, like I said, borrow from the movies about dueling and impose all of that on Missouri state rules. The trusted representative, known as the second to the offended senator, shall send a written challenge to the offending senator. The two senators shall agree to the terms of the duel, including choice of weapons. Verbal. Sure, we're going to have an Oxford debate, and the choice of weapons, come on, which shall be witnessed and enforced by their respective seconds. The duel shall take place in the well of the Senate. That's the most important part of it. Like, okay, even when we used to have duels, the idea was you went to some place that was ostensibly outside the jurisdiction of the local constabulary because they wouldn't allow this kind of thing. This is going to happen in the well of the Senate. I think just sort of really majorly misunderstanding historical dueling etiquette and procedure, but what the hell? This all comes from the movies. That's where he wants it to happen, in the well of the Senate, so that bystanders can be shot. Perfect. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I have to continue on, believe it or not, with this story about the Missouri State Senate proposed rules change that would allow senators, just aggrieved ones, of course, to duel one another. But like I said, the guy the sponsor has borrowed all of the rules presumably from movies that have included duels, and they have all the things. We're going to have seconds, and you're going to have choice of weapons. But the part they appear to have missed, I guess, is that you're supposed to have your duel outside of town or someplace where nobody's going to get hurt, or there's a dueling field or something, someplace, not in the well of the Senate. Although I do wonder whether he thinks that if the duel takes place in the well of the Senate, you might not be able to be arrested for killing each other there, because that makes it part of the official proceedings, and you might be immune from prosecution then. I'm not sure. But just to make sure, in case you were wondering, well, maybe he got it from books about dueling and not movies about dueling. I don't know. The duel, it goes on to say, shall take place in the well of the Senate at the hour of high noon on the date agreed to by the parties to the duel. Not noon, high noon. Totally different thing. That, of course, I think comes from, I don't know. I mean, is there any reference to high noon in the pre-Wild West classic literature on dueling? Is noon? Because, again, normally duels, when there really were duels, I mean, I don't know that much about dueling, but like I'm thinking to Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr duel, right? They're two New York City operators. They decide they're going to have a duel. They have the, the integrity, I suppose, the respect for law and order to understand that, New York City says, by the way, please let's not have duels in the middle of the street. Despite the fact that some 200 and something years later, Donald Trump will say it'll be okay for him to shoot people in the middle of Fifth Avenue. We discourage that. To the extent there are any real rules about dueling, please do it in Weehawken, New Jersey. Already growing disrespect for New Jersey in the late 1700s. But that was the idea, right? Get out of the jurisdiction of town. Go to some lawless place, Weehawken. I don't know. I mean, Weehawken had law, but the idea, again, they rode there across the river by boat to an island off of Weehawken or something. It was unclear. I don't know why. Even by 17 something, whatever the date of the duel was, you had to have some reason to believe, Weehawken is here. The island is right there. It's in the jurisdiction of Weehawken. There might not be any people there or buildings or anything, so whatever constabulary there is not feel compelled to patrol the island. But, gunshots ring out in the early morning offshore in Weehawken. Surely somebody says, look into that. See what's going on. Anyway, you would remove yourself from the area and go do it where somebody couldn't see it, some secretive place. And early in the morning at that, too. Wasn't it first thing in the morning? I don't know. Most of the dueling I've seen in classic literature happens first thing in the morning. First light. High noon, that's cowboy garbage. Anyway, so, and you get your choice of weapons. That's cool, too. So what would be really interesting, of course, is if one of these wackadoodle idiot cowboy types wants to have a duel and thinks it's going to be guns. Oh, they should give him flintlock pistols too, because almost nobody can hit anything with that. But he probably thinks, guns, great. I've got lots of guns and I go to the range all the time. I'm going to win this duel. And the other guy is I'm going to beat that guy because he's an elite liberal foppish Democrat. But it turns out that the elite liberal foppish Democrat is like an Ivy League champion fencer and says, all right, fine. Well, swords. That would really be something. By the way, what a show that would be. Not only the idea of guns dueling in the Senate floor, but what if you choose something ridiculous like that? Like it could be swords. You choose foil or something like that. Like, wow, that's pretty esoteric and weird, but genteel compared to the fact, I guess the guy, what if the guy says samurai swords or something and they just are hacking each other to pieces in the middle of the Senate? Anyway. Also, by the way, I guess at that point, right, I've now been challenged to a duel. All right, fine. I get to choose the weapons, and the duel is going to be at noon on in the well of the Senate. All right, my weapons: dynamite, nuclear weapons, nitroglycerin, Molotov cocktails at 20 paces. I don't know, flamethrowers. This is okay? I don't know. I guess they didn't think about this. They didn't think about very much. By the way, the piece illustrated by a photo of what I guess is the Missouri State Capitol here, which is sort of like, it looks like what I think now you would expect to see if you said, we need a state capitol, and I want Casey DeSantis to design it because she has such an eye for fashion. And it would look like a cheap knockoff of the United States Capitol, which is what it looks like. I'm sure it does fine for Missouri. They don't need anything bigger, better, or weirdo, and that's a good Capitol design. It's just, I don't know. It looks a little, it does look like a cheap knockoff. It's just sort of sitting there in the middle of the street, for one thing. And there's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit sign posted, like as you're driving straight into the building. You're going to want to slow down at some point. Anyway, so that's it. They're going to have some duels. Now, there's an actual political situation behind this, if you care. Oh, here's a picture of the actual bill. It's not very long. Is there anything else dumb and surprising that hasn't been brought in? I read out loud. No, I think that's it. It's a one-pager, so they can handle that. So here's the political situation behind this. James Murphy, Schroer's chief of staff, that's the guy who wrote the bill, Schroer, told Newsweek Senator Schroer is deeply committed, he should be, to restoring a sense of honor in the Missouri Senate. So, murder. While the idea of a duel may have been suggested in a metaphorical sense, there's a print of the bill, guy. The core message is about fostering respect and reminding members that the words used in a debate may have real consequences. That's a really good try, Murphy. Oh, by the way, it's not James Murphy, it's Jamie Murphy, Jamey. You can see how I made that error. That's a new spelling for me of Jamie. It is evident to new members of the Senate that the success of priority legislation is currently dependent on personalities, and old wounds are preventing important language from becoming law. Therefore, we suggest adding new wounds, bullet wounds. I don't know. All right. Until personal disputes find resolution and true leaders step forward to be the first to put aside personal feelings for the betterment of Missouri, we will continue to suggest ways to find a resolution. That is some spin. Now, until we do better at getting civil, we're going to become criminal. All right. There's really more to it, actually. I mean, there's something going on in the Missouri State Senate. So the move comes amid tension within the state Senate. On Tuesday, Caleb Rowden, R-O-W-D-E-N, the leader of the Missouri Senate, removed several members of the Missouri Freedom Caucus. That's the problem. Formerly known as the Conservative Caucus, from chairmanships of committees as the Republican faction continued to clash with leadership. Aha. The caucus last week filibustered for over 8 hours. No, big deal. To hold up the approval of 25 appointments by Governor Mike Parson, as they believed the Senate was moving too slowly on asking voters. You really have to unpack this, right? Why did they filibuster? They filibustered because the Senate was moving too slowly. Ow! But isn't that usually, don't you filibuster in order to get the Senate to move more slowly on things? Yes, but we also want people to shoot each other in the well of the Senate. So, I mean, if you're looking for logic, you're going to have to look elsewhere. And by the way, as soon as you turn your head to look, I'm going to shoot you. In a duel, though, so it's okay. So they filibustered the approval of 25 appointments by the governor because they believed the Senate was moving too slowly on what? On asking voters, to make it harder to amend Missouri's Constitution. What? I mean, I see where sometimes people say, well, it's too easy to, I guess you could say it in the States, it's too easy to amend the Constitution in the state. That's the problem. So obviously we should have a gun battle. But we're moving too slowly on asking the voters to make it harder, i.e. move slower, to amend the Constitution. I'm angry that we're not moving faster to make it harder to move fast on changing the Constitution. Okay, sure. Schroer is a member of this Freedom Caucus, which includes a whopping 6 senators and at least 4 representatives, but did not lose a committee seat, so he's not even personally aggrieved here. The group also wants to make cuts to the state budget, of course, and changes to education funding, including a tax credit program to pay for private school scholarships. And they're not getting their way, and so they should be able to shoot you. In a statement, Rowden called the state legislative session an embarrassment. He said, the beginning of the 2024 legislative session in the Senate has been nothing short of an embarrassment. You see, I told you he called it an embarrassment. A chamber designed to be occupied with civil, principled statesmen and women, almost forgot. He got women into the comment, though. Has been overtaken by a small group of self-interested career politicians who all too often remind me more of my children than my colleagues, because my children probably pose for Christmas cards with guns in their hands, so it does remind me of my children. Senator Jason Bean, a Holcomb Republican and the assistant majority leader, told reporters that the Freedom Caucus had not, quote, followed the tradition of respect and integrity. They have used the floor of the Senate for their own personal interest, make political speeches, no, please, not that, and obstructed the process in which legislation and issues are debated and passed, he said. However, earlier this month, Schroer told the Kansas City Star he disagreed with accusations of authoritarianism within the Republican Party. Oh, did he? The Republican Party has been and always will be will always be concentrating, ABC, always be concentrating, everybody, on finding ways to bridge the gap and find solutions with all interested parties negotiating in good faith, he said. The same goes for the Freedom Caucus, but not for the people that we shoot. Well, seems like an interesting fellow. That's what we're dealing with in this country, or at least in one part of it, in Missouri. Okay, speaking of weirdo lunatic Republicans, and why would we not fill the whole day with this? The Daily Beast has a story of, I don't know, I would say questionable provenance, except they're reporters. For the most part, I don't know anybody that says the Daily Beast is a scandal sheet. They don't do verifiable reporting. Although I think it is possible that the stories now coming out about Nancy Mace might be, unusually motivated. Although I think she's also painted herself into a corner. She probably has. She spray painted herself into a corner. As a matter of fact, if you remember what happened with the alleged vandalism of the sidewalk outside of her home, where she was pretty sure that Antifa had come and spray painted terrible messages, including their exhortations to pass certain pieces of legislation, and then a very neatly encircled A spray painted on the ground because Antifa, right? Oh, that was actually for anarchy. The anarchists use it, and they very pointedly make the A reach outside the circle because, anarchy. But anyway, everybody suspected that she, of course, had spray painted that on her own sidewalk and was looking for attention. But others said, well, there's no definitive proof. It's just partisan Democrats trying to make her look bad. Well, see if you still believe it after this story. Although, again, I would have to say, watch out for this story because I said she spray painted herself into a corner. We've been over the stories about Nancy Mace, moderate that she is, and attention hog. But I believe she's actually motivated her former chief of staff into resigning and running against her in the Republican primary. So, he's telling, he's got unique access to stories that are probably pretty terrible about her. They may even be true. But they're so outrageous that they're kind of hard to believe. So let's see if you believe this one. Nancy Mace's bizarre January 6th plan. Well, it's got to be a good one in order for it to get the bizarre label. Like, there was a lot of bizarre stuff happening on January 6th. What was Nancy Mace doing? And at January 6th, 2021, who was Nancy Mace? Right? Nobody had any idea. And she was brand new, elected. She was 3 days into office, like murdery Trader Green. And what was she there for? She had just been sent there. She was still doing the moderate thing. I'm the non-MAGA moderate Republican. But check this out. Nancy Mace's bizarre January 6th plan included what? Get punched in the face. Now, that's an interesting plan. And I'm not a big Nancy Mace supporter on the policy side, or haven't been until now, but this is intriguing. Punching Nancy Mace in the face. But and it's her idea. Does it mean, can you not get prosecuted for it if you do it on the floor? Is that, well, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about punching Nancy Mace in the face. Well, All right, we will. Who's got the byline in this one? Jake LaHut. This is LaHut, L-A-H-U-T. I've seen the name before. I imagine people just for fun call him Jabba, but that's kind of insulting, obviously, and you don't want to do that. But okay, Jake LaHut, and there's another byline, but the pop-up, Brett Bachman, the night editor there, helped out with this piece. Not the pop-up, but the paywall, which exists at the Daily Beast. But nonetheless, here's the story. On her third day as a congresswoman, and that's important, as violent marauders overtook the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, I'll just editorialize here a little bit. Nancy Mace's thoughts turned to herself. Not her safety, but how can I get in the newspaper in the situation where the Capitol is being overrun by lunatic rioters, which is pretty remarkable. On her third day as a congresswoman, as violent marauders overtook the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, Senator, yeah, right, oh my God, Representative Nancy Mace came up with a bold plan, not, repel the invasion, not stand with the invaders. The bold plan, get punched in the face. That detail first appeared in a Washington Post story Wednesday night as part of a look at the members of Congress who were once appalled by Donald Trump's behavior, who are now jumping to endorse him. That's one of the weird things about Nancy Mace. That's been the major story about Nancy Mace on this show. Although now I'm interested in what was the Washington Post story. Here it is. After 2 Trump wins, congressional Republicans again fall in line. So that's important and weird as well. But let's stick with this story for a second. But the anecdote is also one the Daily Beast heard as part of the reporting on a broader story on Mace's strange ascent in Washington that has yet to be published. According to 3 sources who heard the comments firsthand, that's a lot, Mace used those exact words. She wanted to, quote, get punched in the face. That is an unusual request. And of course, she wanted to go down there and get in the mix. And I guess she thought, I'm not sure who she thought was going to punch her in the face. And it's not entirely clear from this article, although there are many people who now, in hindsight, would like to punch her in the face. I don't know whether she thought she was going to go down there and get punched in the face by the Antifa mobs disguised as Trump supporters, or was she still a never-Trumper, moderate type person, and she thought that she would get punched in the face by Trump people? I don't know. But it says here, she literally begged us to let her leave the office, where they were sheltering, I guess, and head to the floor so she could get punched in the face and get media attention. That was the idea, obviously. Not she's just a masochist, but she may also be. But this is according to one former aide who shared the story on condition of anonymity. That's word for word what she requested. Now, interesting, too. I mean, maybe it's supposedly telling, too. Does it mean anything that Nancy Mace thought that the worst consequence, or in her case, best consequence, of going to the floor in the middle of the riot was that she would be punched in the face, as opposed to murdered? I mean, there was that. I don't know. I guess she just didn't think that was a possibility. Like Ashley Babbitt maybe thought that by breaking through those windows, she would get punched in the face and get media attention, but she got shot and killed instead. And I mean, Nancy Mace at that point presumably has already received her member pin, but in the context of a riot, a brand new member who's unknown by face to anybody in the security contingent, I don't know. I mean, not so certain you can push your way to the floor and not be mistaken for a rioter at that point, or be injured. She's looking to get injured by the rioters, I guess. Anyway, what a weird request. The source continued that there were several of us in the office who heard this. And remember, this is day 3 of the job. Like, you're a new hire. You're like, a brand new member of Congress. This is so exciting. I've always wanted a job on Capitol Hill. And like day 3, your boss says, I need to get to the floor so I can get punched in the face to get media attention. At which point, I mean, if you're the press secretary, 1, oh my God, what have I signed on for? And 2, what am I, chopped liver? I can get you media attention. Don't get punched in the face. Let me just call the newspapers. Anyway, So she'd been in office for 3 days, if that tells you anything about her motivation, this former aide said. Mace ultimately backed off the idea in the face of pushback from her staff. He pushed her in the face. A representative for Mace did not immediately return the Daily Beast's request for comment, which is amazing. I need media attention to the point where I'm willing to get punched in the face during a riot. Hi, would you like to comment on this? No. Make up your mind. But when approached about the incident, the Congresswoman told the Post, oh, okay, maybe she just didn't want to talk to the Daily Beast. No, she didn't want to talk to the Post either. Look at this. The Congresswoman told the Post, quote, what you write doesn't pass for real journalism. Well, now she's just gone over to the MAGA side. But okay. Just 3 years later, Mace has seemingly undergone a 180-degree turn in her feelings on Trump, endorsing the former president this week over her home state ally, Nikki Haley, who backed her most recent re-election bid while she fought off a Trump-backed opponent. So consider the gymnastics there, right? Mace, in running for re-election, was challenged in the primary from the right because she wasn't pro-Trump enough. A Trump-supporting Republican ran against her. Nikki Haley comes to Nancy Mace's defense and endorses her and says, send Nancy Mace, the moderate, to Congress again, not this Trump guy. She wins. She gets to Congress. Then, of course, Haley runs against Trump for the presidential nomination and finds that Nancy Mace has gone MAGA on her. That's amazing. As the Daily Beast reported last October, Mace has been privately suggesting to her Republican colleagues that she may have an actual shot at being Trump's vice president, despite the fact that one source close to the former president says he, quote, absolutely hates Nancy Mace. Now, he absolutely hates everybody. And, of course, he can learn to accept somebody if they grovel enough, and maybe that's the thinking here. Although I'd love to see whether Elise Stefanik challenges Nancy Mace to a duel for the slot on the presidential ticket. That would be terrific. And I think they should have that duel, of course, where? On the floor of the Missouri State Senate, where that is possible. They could have it right here in the U.S. House of Representatives. They have a well. And the weapons could be maces. Except there's only one mace of the House to go around. I wonder if they have a backup. But it could be mace against gavel, or I don't know. Anyway, by the way, who gets the mace? Nancy Mace? And what do we mean by that? Nancy Mace gets the mace to use as a weapon, or she gets the mace from Elise Stefanik, like over the head. Mace in the face. This is terrific. I'm ready to sell T-shirts and pay-per-view. If they still do that sort of thing. All right. So sure, this is a delusional person here, by the way, in case you didn't recognize it. The January 6th incident also underscores the Congresswoman's thirst for the spotlight, as evidenced by a strategy memo she wrote in 2021, just after the Capitol insurrection that she repeatedly expressed had troubled her greatly. She wasn't allowed to be in the mix enough and get punched. I guess that's what troubled her. In it, she described herself as, quote, the, like all capitals, the freshman thought leader on federal issues. What other issues would you be dealing with? I don't know. Officially dubbing herself, she's going to give herself a nickname, which is against the rules, but all caps again. This is her nickname, National Nancy. That is a terrible nickname and a terrible mission. But wow, man, I'm telling you, what are they doing? Where did she go to school? Is she just every bit as arrogant as anybody who ever came out of Harvard thinking they were the smartest person in the room? Imagine showing up on your third day of work as a freshman congressperson, and I'm obviously the smartest. I'm the freshman thought leader on federal issues. I'm National Nancy. Everybody needs to know my name. Although I guess she had the good sense to know somebody's going to want to punch this face today. And that's true. She's reached the correct conclusion there. Her staff handbook also details Mace's singular focus on the office's public relations strategy, with aides expected to send out at least one press release and book the Congresswoman on one television show daily. Rates that, by the way, far surpass that of her colleagues. It is not normal for a member to prioritize media and comms communications over actual legislation like that, a former Mace staffer told the Daily Beast last year, though she had a colleague right there in the Carolinas. Remember that Madison Cawthorn, who got bounced after one term, of course, made that his explicit strategy as well. I don't care about legislation. It's all about communications for me. In my experience with and in other offices, comms serves to promote what the member is doing legislatively. In Mace's office, legislation served to get her more media opportunities. Well, that's the end of the piece. I was reminded along the way that somebody made some great comments about this, and now I'm forgetting what it was on social media. But I wonder if I can scroll. I'll have to probably look during the break. But there were some great comments along the way that a couple of other folks made. Oh, yes, I remember. Just this really did encapsulate it very well. Who says this? I don't know this person offhand. Not a familiar name that we've called before. Zach Burdick, who is the environment and energy reporter for The Hill. Okay. So he's got an eye on these things and I think made the right call. So this plan of hers to go and get punched in the face by whom, I'm not sure, but that this was going to lead to, great things for her nationally as the thought leader. By the way, excellent thought, real good, solid policy work. I'm going to get punched in the face as a thought leader. Okay. Well, Zach says this has got incredible fail girl boss energy and it deserves our respect. I thought this was the part that really encapsulated it, though. You got to know the show in order, but so here in the household, we know the show. This is like something that Judy Gemstone would come up with. And I think it's really, if you haven't seen, what is it? The Righteous Gemstones. Here's a plug for that. Whatever the hell channel that's on, HBO maybe, should send us a big check for promoting an excellent, funny show. Fantastic. But yeah, that's Judy Gemstone all over. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to get punched in the face and I'm going to become famous. And then after that, I'll be a thought leader. Well, I don't know if she would know what a thought leader is, but neither does Nancy Mace. What a show today. America is collapsing, ladies and gentlemen. Get your passports in order. It has nothing to do with the Trump and his coming fascism, though. That's a good idea, too. We just got to escape these lunatics who want to bring back duels and who want to spend their third day in Congress getting punched in the face by, I don't know, whoever happens to be down there. What a great idea. We'll be right back. Why? I don't know. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Whew. Nancy Mace. What a moderator. Anyway, so that's a story, isn't it? Judy Gemstone indeed. And she kind of looks a little, little Judy Gemstone-ish. All right, let's see. What else did we put aside here for our discussions? Just sort of combing through what's in pocket here. Yes, okay. Something that Greg sent over after the 10 a.m. cutoff, but should have been included in yesterday's show where he was noting Christina Caramo's difficulties in Michigan. And by the way, we do have, I guess we'll move from Missouri to South Carolina to Michigan again as Rosalyn MacGregor updates us on what's going on out there. But Greg sends us these stories about Christina Caramo's Michigan mishaps. Remember when we last heard, well, it might have been the time before last, from Rosalyn, we heard that there was a split in the Michigan Republican Party and that crazy Christina Caramo's faction, like the legitimate, she's a nutball, but she was the actual legitimate chair of the Michigan Republican Party, but was beginning to piss off the rest of the Michigan Republican Party by, bankrupting it, making it irrelevant and the butt of jokes nationally, et cetera, and leaving them unprepared to actually fight the next election in a battleground swing state. So other members of the Michigan Republican Party, at the risk of looking like lunatics like Christina Caramo, decided to stage some sort of a coup and tried to see if they could leverage the rules such that they could hold a meeting of their own at which meeting they would officially oust Christina Caramo as Michigan Republican chair and presumably then replace her with somebody normal, like maybe Nancy Mace type person who wants to get punched in the face, something, sedate, duelist, perhaps. And naturally, Christina Caramo took umbrage at that. And then there was a bit of a legal fight as to, all right, well, who has followed the rules here and who has not? This group says that they met and duly voted Christina Caramo out of office. Caramo says their assembly was illegal or at least not in compliance with Michigan Republican Party rules, and so therefore their decision was invalid. What happens? Well, Caramo's chosen general counsel for the party, Dan Hartman, apparently says, well, this isn't a real thing. And the lawyers for the other side obviously say, well, we beg to differ. As it turns out, what we have here, let's see, Jonathan Oosting. Does he say Oosting? It's spelled with two O's, but Oosting. But I think, there you go. Yeah, it is, right? Ah, thank God. Finally, right in the profile. How do you pronounce it? Oosting. Nice. Glad to have gotten it correct the first time around. Oh, I have a pronunciation correction that I was reminded of that came via email yesterday. But first, Oosting reporting breaking news on the 24th, day before yesterday. Christina Caramo, quote, properly removed as Michigan Gop chair, according to an initial but not final review by attorneys for the Republican National Committee. That's interesting. And the response from Dan Hartman, well, lawyers signing a letter does not communicate anything other than their opinion. Therefore, while the letter is authentic, I do not care because their opinion is irrelevant to any resolution. Interesting view. I mean, I guess at bottom it is just a bunch of lawyers for the RNC, but I mean, I guess to the extent that the Republican National Committee is authoritative on the interpretation of the rules of the Michigan Republican Party, or says that, unless you change the rules, you're not a part of the National Party anymore, something like that. And, also we shouldn't forget that the current chair of the Republican National Committee is from Michigan and may actually have some understanding of Michigan rules, or may just be a total partisan hack. Wink. But anyway, so now I guess they'll try to, does this mean they have to go to court to try to figure this out? I think they're already there, actually, and suing one another. But yeah, here's the story from the Michigan Advance, frequently referenced by Rosalyn in her own reports. RNC says Caramo properly removed as Michigan Gop chair, but the national organization holds off on taking action as to who is the party's leader. So we got a schism in the party and a second pope at Avignon, right? And we'll try to figure out which one leads the party, as though it were some group of people that actually they should want to lead. John King is the author of this relatively short piece, so let's run through it and then maybe do our other pronunciation correction and then turn it over to Rosalyn for another Michigan update. The Republican National Committee says it appears that Christina Caramo was properly removed as chair of the Michigan Republican Party, but is foregoing immediate action to settle the dispute. The RNC's counsel's office has reviewed the MI-GOP, Michigan Gop, bylaws, meeting minutes, and other materials provided by both sides in this dispute, stated a letter from RNC General Counsel Michael Whatley. Based on its initial review, it appears to the counsel's office that Ms. Caramo was properly removed in accordance with the Michigan GOP bylaws on January 6th. It's interesting that they just mash it all together. It's not Michigan space GOP, but MIGOP. You've heard Rosalyn say my GOP occasionally, or my GOP. She doesn't use GOP. That's just me. I'm the only one dumb enough to do that, I guess. Anyway, that said, the counsel's offices, it actually says that. That's what it is. It's correct. The counsel's office's determination is not dispositive. So I guess Caramo's lawyer is actually right there. And it recognizes that additional information could conceivably come to light, which changes its view. The RNC is chaired by Ronna Romney McDaniel, when that was prestigious, a former Michigan Republican Party chair herself. The letter dated Wednesday, which is also signed by RNC Chief Counsel Matthew Raymer, was sent to both Karamo and former U.S. Representative Pete Hoekstra, and was obtained by Bridge, Michigan, which reported it on its contents late Wednesday. Is Hoekstra leading the other faction? I guess so. Hoekstra, yeah, there you go, was selected to be the new MIGOP chair at a Saturday meeting in Lansing by the same faction of the state party that voted at a January 6th gathering, wink, wink, not that January 6th, but this January 6th, to oust Karamo. I mean, good choice of dates, though, due to the dismal state of the party's finances. It also filed suit against Karamo in Kent County Circuit Court. KCCC, I guess. Christina, there's a lot of K's in this. In fact, 3. Just saying. Christina Karamo in Kent County Circuit Court, KKKCCC. And there's a history of the pairing. Anyway, looking to secure legitimization under the law as the state's party, which prompted Karamo to file a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, claiming that the issue was an internal party matter and not for the courts to decide. They should probably have a duel, I would say. While a March 15th hearing is set to hear both sides in the lawsuit, and we do that in lawsuits, Michigan Republicans are anxious to resolve the dispute as soon as possible. The state's presidential primary is set for February 27th. Well in advance of the date of actually trying to settle this in court, followed by a planned March 2nd GOP presidential caucus in Detroit to allocate which presidential candidate will be awarded the most delegates toward becoming the party's official nominee this November. Convoluted system there. So, state's presidential primary on February 27th, followed by a caucus. So they do both. It's one of those weirdo states. Well, it's a state full of weirdos, isn't it? All right. Well, anyway, look what they're doing as a result. With that in mind, Whatley stated that the resolution of the dispute had important implications for the presidential delegate selection process in Michigan, further adding that while the RNC has limited power under its rules to issue binding determinations in internal state party disputes, pardon me, wow, it unquestionably has the authority to determine for its own purposes who its voting members are. How it will determine that, I do not know. That's weird. So RNC, limited power on internal state party disputes, but it has the authority to determine for its own purposes who its voting members are. That is the voting members of the Republican National Committee from Michigan, I guess, right? This is wild. With such a determination unlikely to occur prior to the RNC's annual winter meeting, set from January 30th, so coming right up, to February 3rd in Las Vegas, Whatley said both Karamo and Hoekstra would be invited to attend the gathering as guests, although neither would be credentialed as the MIGOP chair. That's interesting. So nobody from Michigan representing the party, and instead the warring factions are both invited. I say they duel. Why not? They got a high noon in Las Vegas. However, he said that following the RNC winter meeting, it's an all-out war. I don't know. A body of RNC members will move quickly to review this dispute and make such recommendations as they believe appropriate. I think they should make recommendations that are inappropriate, like dueling. In response, Karamo ally Dan Hartman, that's the general counsel of the state party, right, who maintains that he is the legitimate general counsel for the state party, sent out an email Thursday morning in which he inferred a conspiracy involving Republicans opposed to Karamo. Can't just oppose them on the facts, right? Nearly 2 weeks ago, after the January 13th special state committee meeting held in Houghton, Houghton, H-O-U-G-H-T-O-N, Houghton Lake, Chairwoman Karamo spoke to the RNC chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, said Hartman. I think in New York they'd say Houghton, but they might say something else elsewhere. Upstate New York, though. After their call was completed, Chairwoman Karamo asked me to schedule a call with a team of RNC lawyers. During my call with the RNC lawyers, they correctly informed me that the RNC does not interfere in state committee intra-party disputes. They also made a specific reference to the Virgin Islands. I am puzzled. Let's see where this goes. I think this is important because this also happens to be another John Yob operation station. How does that work for you? Does that clear things up? I guess there's a real reason for it. Yob is a longtime GOP political consultant who has worked for Hoekstra in the past. And am I pronouncing that right? I don't know. Hoekstra? I don't know. And Karamo supporters have blamed Yob as being behind the effort at removing her as chair. Okay. He made headlines in 2016 during a GOP delegate dispute in the Virgin Islands. That is, they helpfully explain, a U.S. territory east of Puerto Rico. But how that factors into the Karamo-Hoekstra fight wasn't explained by Hartman. So you're just out there on your own. Regardless, Hartman made clear Karamo supporters remain steadfast in their resolution to retain leadership of the party. I mean, I guess newspapers still just aren't comfortable saying this, but babbling incoherently, Hartman referred to some stuff that nobody knew what the F he was talking about, and he might just be a lunatic street person, which is not nice to say, I know. But you also shouldn't be general counsel of the state party. I mean, if we acknowledge that you are mentally troubled and it might be beyond your control and it's, would be ableist to get down on you about it, still no one would recommend you to be general counsel of the state party. I think that's just true. To be clear, lawyers signing a letter, this is the quote we got from before, does not communicate anything other than their opinion. And in this he's right. Therefore, while the letter is authentic, and he does grant that, I do not care because their opinion is irrelevant to any resolution. Like, he could have said that was a forgery, right? And who wouldn't believe it at this stage? Republicans have been forging up to and including electoral college vote certificates. So why not forge one of these too? Hartman said it was business as usual for the party and that they plan to be the ones electing delegates at the March 2nd convention. It's obvious that this drama is part of the mission to remove Chairwoman Karamo. I agree there. In my opinion, this letter was politically motivated. Well, of course it is. It's a political party. To try and further intimidate her and her team, he concluded. While Karamo has yet to publicly comment about the letter, Hoekstra told the Detroit News the counsel's office had made the correct assessment, and he looked forward to the committee coming to the same conclusion swiftly so that we can unite the party and once again win Michigan for President Trump. Wow. Okay. Well, it's exciting developments, and gosh, I hope we got all the pronunciations close to correct. Speaking of pronunciations, I got an impatient upbraiding from a listener who I guess was, I don't know, seemingly pretty agitated about this, by the way. The drugs that Trump and company were stealing from the White House pharmacy during the 4 years, yes, were, let's see, among other things, lots of, I guess, some particularly high volume of Ambien was removed. And then that's the depressant, right, for the sleep aid, wink, wink, the downers. The uppers that were getting stolen was a drug I was not familiar with the pronunciation of. And it was what? P-R-O-V-I-G-I, couldn't decide whether it's P-R-O-V-I-G-I-L, I guess. I don't have the text in front of me, but that's what's referred to in this, agitated note about pronunciation. And I couldn't decide at the time on the fly, reading it live, seeing the name of the stupid drug, which, drug names are particularly dumb and unhelpful in pronunciation guides, generally speaking, because they're also trying to make very clever puns very often. But those stupid / clever puns can often be a clue to the stupid / clever pronunciation. And that was the writer's point in all of this. I couldn't decide whether the G in it was hard or soft sounding. Was it going to be Providone Provigil or Provigil, right? Well, it's neither, apparently. It is Provigil. The emphasis, I guess, would be there. Why? Remember, again, the stupid naming protocols of these commercial drugs. Vigil, like vigilance, like you stay awake, right? You stay on vigil. And it's a stimulant. Geez, it says here. Which, like I said, it comes under the title of It's Pronounced Provigil. And I believe that's 3 exclamation points. And then, like vigilance, it's a stimulant. Geez. And I gather that, I don't know, there's strong circumstantial evidence that the writer may be administering Provigil at this point. It may be a little bit too much. Or I should suggest maybe a switch to decaf or something. It's a little more excitable a correction than I was looking for. And I'm going to have a duel with you, I guess, naturally. Although I don't know, maybe this letter was a challenge to the duel. But, at least you were listening, I guess. Okay, so there you go. Provigil, we'll call it, instead of what an American English speaker would perhaps call it. Anyway, drug names are stupid, and I think we can all recognize that. Let's see. Still time for us to roll the latest from Rosalyn MacGregor, who brings us yet another crazy fight in which Michigan has embroiled itself, but a different focus. And, we want to get this one on the record as soon as possible because of those primary contests which are coming up. Here's a different angle on it from Rosalyn MacGregor.
Good morning, David.
Good morning,
Your
indeed.
listeners will remember that because of a ballot initiative approved by Michigan voters in 2018, control of the 2020 census redistricting was removed from the state legislature and given to an independent commission. The fair election map that resulted from the process gave Democrats historic control of both the Michigan House and Michigan Senate by narrow margins. However, certain people weren't happy and challenged the resulting districts in court. Just before Christmas, federal judges ruled that boundaries in 13 districts drawn up by the Independent Redistricting Commission violated the Voting Rights Act. With the 2024 election coming this November, 13 of Michigan's House and Senate districts, all currently held by Democrats, will need to be redrawn. The judges ruled they violated the Voting Rights Act by diluting black voting power in more than a dozen Detroit area legislative districts. Quote, "The record here shows overwhelmingly, indeed inescapably, that the Commission drew the boundaries of plaintiffs' districts predominantly on the basis of race," stated the opinion. "We hold that those districts were drawn in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution." End quote. The 3-judge panel were all appointed by Republican former President George W. Bush. The lead attorney representing the plaintiffs is John Brush, a former state solicitor general under GOP former attorney general Bill Schuette, who has representative anti-LGBTQ plus rights and anti-abortion causes. The Democrats having slender majorities in both chambers, including a current tie in the House following 2 resignations, the ruling threatens to have major implications for control of the Michigan legislature. The commission was then ordered to produce new race-blind maps in less than a month's time, with that effort getting underway recently as commissioners worked against a court-imposed deadline set for February 2nd. The issue was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court after a request for an injunction instead to prepare for the 2026 elections was denied by the federal district court. The U.S. Supreme Court is now being asked to intervene in the process of redrawing 7 state house districts, which include the Grosse Pointe and St. Clair Shore suburbs, downriver Detroit, and parts of Oakland and Macomb counties. In a brief filed Wednesday with the nation's highest court, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, representing the interests of Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, warned about the potential for voters to be whipsawed if the new district boundaries go into effect this year as currently planned. Quote, "The court should thus grant a stay of the district court's injunction to the extent it requires the secretary to implement new district lines in time for the 2024 elections cycle," stated the brief. The Secretary does not oppose the request for a stay of the remedial proceedings requiring the Commission to draw new districts. Simply, the Secretary's primary concern is the orderly administration of the August 2024 primary election. The candidate filing deadline for the August primary is April 23rd. Quote, "It is the unknown potential for error and voter confusion in the impacted districts that compels the Secretary's conclusion that a stay of the injunction is the wiser course of action, that, and the possibility that this court may reverse the district court, thereby negating any need to redraw the districts in the first place," Nestle's brief said. If things weren't dramatic enough in Michigan politics, we've added new challenges to the narrowest of holds Democrats currently have in the State House and State Senate. Local politics will be very exciting in Michigan this summer and fall. Back to you, David.
All right. Yeah, that'll be another interesting twist on the many problems that the party is having, and and of course, the other party, the Michigan Republican Party, is having in the state, and it impacting, I guess, that fight growing outward. And I don't know do we know which faction of the Republican Party? Do both factions back this action against the districts? This is interesting. So lots to settle, both internally and externally, party-wise, in Michigan. So we'll see how this one shakes out. Okay, I had my eye on a couple other things while we were rolling, and I'm keeping an eye on the clock to see what kind of things we can fit in before our next break, and that's not entirely clear. But something I wanted to get back to, although maybe I want to save it for the next segment so that I can read it more or less uninterrupted, was the Money Out, Voters In movement in California that we introduced to you yesterday, because their deadline for their work is coming up quickly as well on California legislative initiative known as AB 83. And we'll just start that narrative over again, since we got it a little bit backwards yesterday in terms of reading through the diaries that have been posted on it. But let's see, a couple of other items that we might be able to sneak in with respect to the still looming 14th Amendment challenges to Trump's eligibility. Rick Hasen wrote 2 short pieces at his election law blog on some finer points of what's going on there. Let's see, which one is first? January 18th entry from the other day. A amicus brief being filed in the case. Is this one just as short? No, this one's actually a little longer. But let's see. There's also a somewhat shorter piece. Trump abandons key argument he raised in his cert petition that the question of disqualification is a non-justiciable political question reserved for Congress. That he removed from his cert petition, likely for a political reason. I know that's a mouthful. That's the title of the piece. But Rick Hasen is operating on a higher level than most of us on this subject. But let's quickly run through his relatively short piece and see if we can figure it out. In his cert petition in the disqualification case, that is his bid to bring it before the Supreme Court, Donald Trump argued Congress, not a state court, is the proper body to resolve questions concerning a presidential candidate's eligibility. There is no similar commitment of questions concerning presidential eligibility to state courts, particularly in the absence of a duly enacted enforcement statute. Considering the constitutional role for Congress in addressing presidential qualifications, it is little surprise that every court except Colorado that has addressed the political question doctrine when presented with the question of determining Trump's eligibility has held that the question is non-justiciable and reserved to Congress. That was their initial argument. Well, it's gone now from Trump's brief on the merits. The closest the brief comes now is arguing that Section 3 should be enforced only through Congress's chosen methods of enforcement. Note the weak should, not must. First flagged by Chris Geidner in his indispensable Law Dork newsletter. I love how you have to now cite things like that. But it's a good newsletter. It's just he chose to call it Law Dork, and now we're stuck with having to say it. Now, why the change? Got one paragraph left and just a minute to get through it. It's easy to imagine the Supreme Court punting on the merits and leaving the issue to be resolved by Congress after the election. The Foley-Ginsburg-Hazen amicus brief, referred to a minute ago, the other piece I have from him, spells out some of that chaos. One scenario is that Congress, after Trump appears to win, determines he's disqualified or there's a dispute about it. If Democrats control Congress, Trump would want to go to the Supreme Court to fight about it and not leave it as a non-justiciable question for Congress. Did the lawyers not think this through when they filed their cert petition? Interesting. So I guess in their petition to be heard by the Supreme Court, they said, well, this thing ought to be resolved by Congress and no one else. And now I guess thinking better of it, or thinking about the possibility that they might face a Democratic-controlled Congress post-2024 election, they've decided to take that out of their arguments, and it really needs to be decided by the Supreme Court. You know, the 6-3 Supreme Court, where he installed 3 of the justices, and they're supposed to, in his mind, pay him back for the honor / lifetime appointment / unstoppable paycheck. Will that work? I don't know, but an interesting omission nonetheless. We'll read his other piece after this.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, one last segment here to send you off into the weekend. Let's first, before turning back to the California initiative, read through Rick Hasen's writing on this. I know this is it's dense because he assumes you're following along with the election law along the way, but it's digestible. The as I understand it here, the what he's pointing out here is the change in emphasis in the argument made here by the Trump team. When they first petitioned for cert, they said Congress is the proper body to resolve these questions, and we think that the Supreme Court should punt it as non-justiciable and hand it back to Congress. But in their substantive brief on it, they didn't bring that argument up again. Although, so I guess Rick Hasen thinks that the reason may be that if the court were to punt on the merits and leave the issue to be resolved by Congress, what if Congress was controlled by Democrats and in fact agreed that he should have been disqualified, and they vote to disqualify him or take some other tack here? Who knows how they would vote on it? And would they rather than Trump's team that they go to back to the Supreme Court and actually get a ruling on the merits? And I was thinking along the way, well, but isn't it the case? I was thinking actually more about the case of what the Congress does in the case of the lack of a clear winner in the Electoral College, that they vote by state delegation rather than as individuals, so that even if the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress, it was not guaranteed that they would produce a result disqualifying Trump. But that's not the process for removing disqualification under the 14th Amendment. Let's see, do I have it handy? Does it give us the threshold? It's not a vote by state delegation situation anyway. So if there was a Democratic majority in the House, they would, face a real challenge here. It says that Congress, not only do they vote individually, but by a vote of 2/3 would remove such disability. But of course, this is one of the problems with punting it back to the Congress, right? And if the Supreme Court were to say this is non-justiciable, the fact we find, as Republicans argue, that the mention of Congress in Section 3 as having the ability to remove the disability, that means that it's Congress that determines eligibility, which is not what it says. It says Congress can remove the disability, which is presumably imposed on it by someone else. I mean, I guess it doesn't rule out the possibility that Congress could determine the person to be ineligible, and I guess they have that right, as they also explicitly have the right to remove the disability. But the ability to remove the disability doesn't mean they have the ability to impose the disability. See? But on the other hand, I guess in a situation like that where the election is over and now we're being asked, are you going to certify this electoral college result, given that he might be ineligible and there might be a majority in Congress willing to declare him to be ineligible? Does it matter? I mean, it doesn't. What it very definitely doesn't say anywhere is that it would require a 2/3 vote to declare him ineligible, to disqualify him. It's only the 2/3 vote to remove the disability. So presumably, in the absence of setting the threshold, if the Supreme Court says that the law of the land shall be that Congress determines whether or not he's disqualified, and there's no explicit statement that it has to be done by any certain threshold, then a majority should do it. And I guess that's what Hazen is thinking about. What if it's a Democratic Congress and both houses, I guess, would be asked to vote on this thing? And I don't know exactly. I don't know what form it would come in. I guess in the form of a joint resolution declaring him ineligible, and I guess a mere majority could pass it in both houses. Naturally, it would be, I guess, filibustered in the Senate. But how they choose to deal with that, I have no idea. But maybe there are more clues in his other piece, which is about an amicus brief that he joined Ned Foley and Ben Ginsberg in filing. This brief warns the SCOTUS of political instability, potential violence, and voter disenfranchisement if it avoids deciding the merits in the Trump disqualification case. This is his initial piece on this. Thanks to the excellent work of Michael Kimberly and Charles Seidel of the McDermott firm, Ned Foley, Ben Ginsberg, and I have filed this amicus brief, it is linked herein, supporting neither party in the Trump disqualification case at the Supreme Court, but below is part of the introduction and an excerpt comparing the situation to 2020. Okay, amici, that's them, the friends of the court, often do not see eye to eye on matters of law or policy, that is, as between Rick Hazen, Ned Foley, and Ben Ginsberg. But they joined together in this brief to make a single urgent point, a decision from this court leaving unresolved the question of Donald Trump's qualification to hold office as President of the United States under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment until after the 2024 election would risk catastrophic political instability, chance disenfranchising millions of voters, and raise the possibility of public violence before, on, and after November 5th, 2024. And the grounds for avoiding the merits are not credible. Colorado manifestly had the authority to determine Mr. Trump's legal qualifications for the office he seeks, and this court has jurisdiction to review that federal law decision on its merits. To punt on the merits would invite chaos while risking great damage to the court's reputation and to the nation as a whole. The country is more polarized today than at any other time in living memory, certainly more than in December 2000, when this court last decided a case with direct impact on the outcome of a presidential election. Controversy over the 2020 election led millions of Americans to doubt the integrity of the electoral system and ultimately culminated in the storming of the U.S. Capitol. Hello, on January 26, 2021. Political tensions have not eased in the time since. Quite the opposite. Political discourse has stoked further public skepticism of the electoral system since January 2021. Amici thus filed this brief not only to demonstrate that the court can reach the merits of Mr. Trump's qualifications under Section 3, but that it should do so, or else seek political instability not seen since the Civil War. And I guess more context to add to this, it wasn't included in here because we didn't know yet, the insistence among Republican-governed states, that is, states with Republican governors anyway, joining in support of Texas's declaration that to hell with the Supreme Court ruling on who controls the federal border. We're just going to continue to pretend it's a state issue until someone makes us not do it. I was bringing that up if only to remind you that, well, if the Supreme Court says that it's Congress that has to decide, what if Congress says, to hell with that, Texas didn't listen to you, neither do we? I don't know. Anyway, I'm not certain why they would do that, especially if they were just handed the power to determine the presidency's eligibility by the court. Well, it says here that you get to decide. But remember also, how do you, I guess part of the political instability and potential for violence that they're pointing to, I mean, this is not inconsistent with their brief at all, right? If the Supreme Court says, for whatever reason, it's up to Congress to determine eligibility and doesn't give any direction as to how they might do that, or maybe they do give direction, I don't know. But the point is, suppose they hand the Congress, you may, by majority vote of both houses, determine his disqualification. Do Republicans accept that, especially if there's a Democratic Congress in both houses and they're obviously going to vote to disqualify Trump? I don't know how obvious it is, by the way. They may not. I don't know. Can you imagine? It's a narrowly divided and House, moderate Democrats. Gee whiz, this could really destabilize things. And it could. They wouldn't be wrong. And so therefore say, well, we better accept the fascist president or we could get killed, which we're going to get killed anyway. But what the hell? We'll roll the dice and maybe he won't kill us first and we'll have a chance to escape to Canada. Or we'll have a duel on the floor. I don't know. But do you think Republicans then say, well, we didn't accept the Supreme Court's ruling in the border case. Why would we accept the ruling here? Now, who says Congress has the right to elect the president, except the Constitution or whatever, and under certain circumstances? Those aren't happening. We have different circumstances. And therefore, and even if they were exactly the same and we were going to lose, to hell with it. To hell with everything if we're going to lose. That's the problem. Anyway, back to the actual brief here. The possible scenarios if the court fails to resolve the Section 3 question once and for all are alarming. If Mr. Trump wins an electoral vote majority, anyway, it is a virtual certainty that some members of Congress will assert his disqualification under Section 3. That prospect alone will fan the flames of possible conflict. But even worse for the political stability of the nation is the prospect that Congress may actually vote in favor of his disqualification after he has apparently won election in the Electoral College. Neither Mr. Trump nor his supporters, whose votes effectively will have been discarded as void, are likely to take such a declaration lying down. Well, we think so. But sometimes we're surprised by how lame these jokers sometimes are. Just given that they've sometimes been moved to violence, you never know. Even if Mr. Trump did willingly stand aside, it is wholly unclear who would be inaugurated as president on January 20th, 2025. Would it be Mr. Trump's running mate pursuant to the 20th Amendment? Would it be Mr. Biden pursuant to a 12th Amendment election in the House? Unlikely, even with a Democratic majority, given the way things are structured. Or would it be some alternate candidate thrown into the mix in the heat of the political battle? The chance that there would be no clear answer come Inauguration Day 2025 and that the country thereby would be thrown into a possibly catastrophic constitutional crisis is disturbingly high. Amici have devoted their careers, and diverted their careers, I would say, to the study and practice of election law, earning independent reputations as preeminent experts in the field. That was nice of you to say about yourselves. Although they often disagree on matters of policy and ideology, Amici share a deep-seated conviction that free and fair elections bolster voter confidence and trust in the political process. Amici also share an expert understanding of the constitutional system for elections, which not only places responsibility for administering federal election contests first in the hands of the states, but also leaves an essential role for this court to say what the law is, citing Marbury versus Madison. Overused, overrated. Okay. Finally, it is worth contrasting the current situation with the aftermath of the 2000 election. As Florida conducted its recounts and litigation swirled, this court initially returned the case to the Florida Supreme Court with the suggestion that it consider the question of whether Florida's procedures were constitutional. That, in the case of Bush versus the Palm Beach County Canvassing Board, this unanimous punt kept the court temporarily on the sidelines as the recount process and litigation continued. Depending upon how the recount went, it was conceivable that this court would avoid weighing in. Alas, that was not to be. See Bush v. Gore. This time, however, kicking the can down the road would be far more fraught for the country. There is every reason to believe that disqualification challenges will continue to proliferate if this court fails to give guidance. In the meantime, voters who cast their votes for Mr. Trump risk disenfranchisement for supporting a candidate who may later be held ineligible for office. Because they won't get a do-over, these voters deserve to know now whether their ballots for Mr. Trump will be counted. Further, requiring Congress to take up the issue in an inherently political process on the 4th anniversary of the U.S. Capitol riot would be a tailor-made moment for chaos and instability. The pressure on Congress from all sides would be enormous, as would the temptation to resolve the disqualification question not as a matter of the legal or factual merit, but as an exercise of political power, and one in which people are actually looking to get punched in the face for no reason. This court stands between the potentially disastrous turmoil that would result and a comparatively peaceful election administered consistent with the Constitution and the rule of law. It should not let this opportunity to stave off political instability pass. So how do you like that? Well, what stands out about that is, once again, these guys think they're the smartest ones in the room, although they stand a chance of actually having it be right this time. And they are the thought leaders on this issue. They are National Ned Foley, Ben Ginsberg, and Rick Hazen. Okay, so that leaves us some time to get back to what we started yesterday, and we'll start over again with, this time in chronological order. These diaries over at Daily Kos, mostly, I think, if not all, by Michelle Sutter, I'm not certain which, and I didn't remember to check. Money out, voters in. MOVI. Remember this? California can close the Citizens United foreign money loophole with AB 83. We'll start all over again with the narrative, which begins with the rhetorical device, the wait what device. I thought foreign money was already illegal in our elections. One California lawmaker told us when we met in their Sacramento office. We were talking about AB 83, Assembly Bill AB. Right? Maybe, I think. The Get Foreign Money Out of California Elections Act. Their assumption was understandable for a couple of reasons. First, that U.S. election code is clear. It shall be unlawful for a foreign national, directly or indirectly, to make a contribution to any political campaign or political party. 52 U.S. Code Section 30121. And the California legislature had unanimously passed a bill in 2021. Unanimously, wow. Which the governor signed to prohibit foreign governments, foreign businesses, and foreign individuals from contributing to California elections. That was 2021's AB 319. Given these two unambiguous laws, one federal and one state, how is it possible that there is foreign money in our elections? And the answer lies in the rightly reviled Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, which has been turbocharging the undermining of American democracy for almost 14 years. As bad as we knew that decision was, it's actually worse. When the Supreme Court decided that corporate entities should have the free speech rights of natural persons, expanding the definition of speech, by the way, to encompass money spent in U.S. elections. Part of that preposterously flawed reasoning, allowing U.S. corporations to contribute unlimited amounts of money from their corporate treasuries, was because, the court said, U.S. corporations were associations of citizens. Justice Kennedy, writing for the five-man majority, and yes, they were all men, and yes, ethics-challenged Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito were among them, employed the association of citizens rationale 3 times. These giant multinational corporations, incorporated in the United States, are not associations of U.S. citizens. It wasn't true before Citizens United, and it is a linguistic atrocity to try to categorize them as such now. 40% of all the shares held in U.S. corporations are now held by foreign investors living outside the U.S. These investors can be sovereign wealth funds, as is the Saudi way, or government banks like Norges, the Central Bank of Norway, which I've undoubtedly pronounced incorrectly. Really? Norway? Yes. Norway has significant oil and gas industry interests and are major investors in U.S. corporations. AB 83 will close the loophole that the court opened for foreign money in California elections. Seattle closed the loophole in 2020, and the state of Minnesota closed it on May 2023. California must close it in 2024. So there's a roadmap here, and they're just taking it. That's all. I'm not a U.S. company, and I don't make decisions based on what's good for the U.S. That's a quote and a stark statement of a behemoth U.S. corporation's consideration of patriotism in their decision-making. It's from Lee Raymond, longtime CEO of Exxon in 2003. It's unlikely that he or any other CEO of a giant multinational would admit to this now. The SCOTUS has deemed U.S. corporations are, quote, associations of citizens, and Raymond's sentiment is not civic-minded. Giant U.S. multinational corporations with massive amounts of foreign investment, 40% overall, decide what America can spend money on and how much America can invest in its people, its children, and the general welfare. Foreign-influenced U.S. corporations are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in California elections. Uber, for instance, with a $3.5 billion in investment from Saudi Arabia, and Lyft, with $10 billion from China, spent over $200 million to successfully repeal an enacted law that they didn't like. California's Proposition 22 from the year 2020, which guaranteed rights and benefits to rideshare drivers and other gig workers. To paraphrase and take some license with ardent AB3 supporter FEC Commissioner Ellen Weintraub's words, allowing foreign money to mix in with American money that is then funneled into our elections is dangerous and dumb. The 2 Ds you don't want. Some years ago, I, our writer here, found myself at dinner with the late, great Alan Rickman. Hey, how do you like that? He was a dear friend of a dear friend, and it was just the 3 of us. Nice dinner. We were talking politics, as Alan did. It was in the Bush 43 years, on the cusp of Obama's first election, and Alan said, the whole world should vote on the U.S. president. It's too important to be left to Americans. Interesting. I had a Gene Roddenberry moment, imagining a united Earth, keeping the universe safe while exploring its mysteries. Don't leave it in our hands, the safety of the universe. But that is not where we were then, and it's not where we are now. Alan was a good guy and a smart guy, and he sure could persuade, but marvelous as he was English. I shook my head and said no. Americans fought a revolution to escape the yoke of England and forge their own way without English influence and interference, even if it comes from nice guy actors, I guess. The whole world should not have a vote in U.S. elections, nor should the whole world spend money in U.S. elections to influence our vote. American elections are increasingly decided by money. Can we at least make sure it's American money? Seriously. That's a good point. And there's more to it. Next one up from January 4th of this year, complete with a hashtag of its own in the title. Close the loophole. Hashtag close the loophole. Help California fix the foreign money mess Citizens United made. the second entry in this series. The clock is now ticking. We have only 28 days to keep AB 83, the Get Foreign Money Out of California Elections Act, alive in the California legislature, or it will be dead until at least 2025. We can't let that happen. We need an activist tsunami to make sure it doesn't, and I guess it's ticking down. That was January 4th, and there were 28 days, so I guess it's really the month of January, and it's the 26th right now. The weekend eats up the 27th and 28th, just a couple of days left. We'll have to see how they're faring in their later entries. But just to keep things in chronological order, when our corrupted SCOTUS granted U.S. corporations the right to spend unlimited amounts of money in our elections with their democracy-busting Citizens United ruling, they made a mistake that opened a loophole for foreign money to flood into our elections. You know all about that. It's a mistake that'll come back to haunt them if we're successful. It's Citizens United's Achilles heel. The SCOTUS hung their corporate rights opinion on the idea that U.S. corporations are associations of citizens, which they are not by any stretch. 98% of the S&P 500 U.S. corporations will likely qualify as foreign influenced under the provisions of AB 83 and will be barred from contributing to campaigns, candidates, and, oh boy, everything shifted thanks to the pop-up of some video that I don't want to see here on Daily Kos. Where did we go to here? 98% would be classified as foreign influenced if AB 83 were to pass, and would be barred from contributing to campaigns, candidates, PACs, super PACs, political parties, and ballot measures. Model legislation has been developed to #close the loophole that is allowing foreign money to pour into U.S. elections. It's now law in Minnesota and pending in New York, Massachusetts, Hawaii, Washington State, and California. The same model language was introduced in the U.S. Congress by Jamie Raskin when Democrats controlled the House, and by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who included the language in her omnibus anti-corruption package. And as we know, it's actions in the states that spur federal actions. And as California goes, so goes the nation. I guess everybody thinks that about their state. We heard it just the other day with respect to Virginia. And also illustrating the piece here, a photo of the California state capitol, which itself looks like pretty much a knockoff of the U.S. federal capitol. I guess that's really popular, although there are some really interesting designs in some of the states. We should take a look at that one day. This should be an easy aye vote for legislators. Foreign money in our elections is objectively a bad thing, right? Not everybody thinks so, I guess. Not Alan Rickman, anyway. It's also prohibited under U.S. code, and it's also self-evident that as 40% of all the shares held in U.S. corporations are held by foreign investors, when those corporations spend money from their corporate treasuries in our elections, some of that money is foreign money. So, why isn't AB 83's current whip count, which we estimate at that point at 50, and it needs 54 out of 80 to pass the Assembly, cruising over the 2/3 majority required to amend California's Political Reform Act of 1974, especially when Democrats hold supermajorities in both chambers of the California legislature? Well, you already know the answer. It's the money. Next month, it will have been 14 years since Citizens United eviscerated campaign finance law. Around that time, California imposed 12-year term limits on legislators, so none of the members of the California legislature have run a campaign in a pre-Citizens United climate. In fact, only 2 California legislators take no corporate money at all, and unsurprisingly, they are the author and co-author of AB 83, Alex Lee and Ash Kalra. It's understandable that legislators are concerned about how they will fund their campaigns if foreign influence corporations can't continue to contribute to their re-election efforts. Some of them have told us exactly that. To allay their fears, their constituents need to light up their phones now and for the next 3.5 weeks, and we're getting to the end of that period. As one California Democratic DNC member advised me, they need to get so many phone calls that they finally say, let me just vote for this damn thing and stop hearing about it. And included in all of these things is an action box. How can you help? Giving directions, if you live in California, on how to contact your assembly member and what to say to them when you do. Assaults on our democracy are everywhere and stunningly Many of them are coming from the now cartoonishly corrupt Roberts Court. There is not a lot that we the people can do to combat what Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has called this MAGA-eyed court. But shooting an arrow into the heel of Citizens United, getting foreign-influenced U.S. corporations out of our elections, will be a seismic rebuke. So you might consider giving that a chance. Then the third in this series of diaries was one we actually read first yesterday from January 9th. And then lastly, an entry from January 17th as Jamie Raskin is tweeting support about as San Jose bans foreign influence corporations in elections. All California should be next with the passage of AB 83. So, if you live in California, still time to weigh in and still time for the legislature to take action, I guess, but they're really getting down to the wire. So I recommend that you take a look at these diaries. We'll include them in the roundup as we close out the week. Now time for us to roll that outro music and get out of Justice Putnam's way as he brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy this Friday. And now that we've delayed things enough and started the music late, let's read through. This seems to be a Friday thing. We're able to finally read his summary of what's coming up, starting off in his Bistro Cafe. Trump lashed out against everyone and everything after another devastating day in court. Ooh, I did forget to mention that. He did, in fact, take the stand in the E. Jean Carroll case yesterday, but actually followed the rules more or less after, I guess, the judge berated the lawyers there and said, listen, we're just not going to allow you to tromp over everything. He spent a total of about 3 minutes and answered one question on direct examination while he was on the stand. Really pointless. Anyway, then he spent the rest of the day lashing out, I guess. On the rest of the menu, Florida removed sociology as a core course option for public colleges, because students should focus on preparing for high-demand, high-wage jobs, not woke ideology. Way to ruin your colleges there. The Republican Ohio Attorney General rejected a voting rights coalition's ballot petition for a second time, and a bid to overhaul New Mexico's oil and gas regulations clears its first hurdle amid fierce litigation. The fiercest? What other kind of litigation is there?
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
More from the international picture. This time, anti-Semitic acts rising sharply in Belgium and France since the Israel-Hamas war began, and Japan's precision moonlander has hit its tiny target on the moon's surface, just upside down. Well, that was probably a bug in the code there. Take a look at that one, and we'll see you next week.